Hello, and welcome to the Dissident Mama podcast. Today, my guest is Nicholas. Nicholas is co founder of Orthodox Reflections, a collaborative effort by committed Orthodox Christians to provide thoughtful analysis of the Orthodox Christian faith's interaction with American culture. He serves as the website's executive editor and is one of its most prolific contributors. Nicholas is a former Marine with an undergraduate degree in international relations, with a specialty in Eastern Europe and an MBA in international finance. He taught for several years in Poland at the university level prior to converting to Orthodoxy more than 25 years ago. Nicholas has Polish heritage and is fluent in the language, but was raised evangelical in these United States, where he was born of immigrant parents. He has 5 children, and while he does travel extensively on business, he only leaves the South when his clients force him to. Welcome, Nicholas.
Thank you. Good to be here. Appreciate it. I
Yes,
thought you might get a chuckle out of the last one, but I do mean it. I really
yes,
do.
excellent. So we tried to get together in March, and then you helped hook me up with Archimandrite Filaret Voloshin from the Kiev Theological Academy. So I feel like I know you. We've been like Twitter friends for quite a while, and I share your stuff all the time. We are of like minds. So it's just an honor to finally get you on the show.
Oh, it's great to be here. So I've been following the development of your various projects, and it's looking fantastic. Hope the conference that you're having soon is going well. The planning for it.
Yes, we'll get into that a little bit because there's some crossover with some things y'all have written about recently. But let's just say all the right people dislike me and probably you. So we're doing
Hmm.
something right.
Well, we could probably compare our block lists on Twitter. They probably have substantial overlap.
Yes, exactly. So y'all's website started in 2020. Was it kind of born out of the COVID hysteria and the BLM riots, or was it something in the works beforehand?
Oh, it was totally birthed by COVID. So
Okay.
yeah, I've been involved in quite a number of different Orthodox ministries over the years, and so I had a pretty extensive contacts, lots of friends on Facebook. And so going into the lockdown, we were floored. We were
Right.
absolutely floored when Pascha was canceled. When we were first told about the lockdown, when it was announced here, my home state is Florida. When it was announced, I was like, well, you can't give communion via the mail or via the screen. So how do they plan to make us Orthodox go along with this? And
Hmm.
then we went along with it. I was in a Greek archdiocese parish at the time, and they absolutely went along with it. And so we were floored. We were shocked. We had never thought that anything like this would possibly happen. And so a lot of us were spending a lot of time complaining. And then we started writing bishops, and the bishops didn't care. And we got responses back that, what's wrong with you? Why are you anti-public health? So the bishops that we wrote to as individuals didn't seem to care one way or the other about our opinions on anything. They were firmly in Fauci's camp. They believed that we were doing the right thing by denying care to the spiritual care to those who were in the end of life. They thought locking individuals up in nursing homes and not allowing them to see their parents, their children, their grandchildren. They responded that that was what was necessary at this time. And then, of course, you saw the articles appearing like on OCA's website about how we need to fast from communion and
Right.
justifications that were coming out. So several of us decided, stop complaining on Facebook where
Yeah.
nobody cares and start doing something that we could actually maybe be of some benefit, particularly when many evangelical churches locked down, but many did not. And we
Hmm.
started to see a trend where the evangelicals and others were using the compliance of multiple Orthodox jurisdictions as a criticism of us. Well, they can't be real if they're willing. They say kissing icons is a non-negotiable part of their tradition. Well, they just canceled kissing icons. These Orthodox, they can't be real. They can't mean what they're saying.
Yeah.
And so we also felt that not only do we need to try to help the situation, especially since we had medical staff, we had doctors, a medical student, a clinical educator that wanted to start talking about these issues. But we also wanted to say to the world, look, this isn't who we are.
Mhm.
Okay. And there is not universal compliance with this, but this is not who the Orthodox are. This is not the Orthodox faith. And we felt that we had an obligation to say all of those things and provide a public forum where others could join us, because we allowed others to send in submissions as well.
Yeah, I often say about that time period, it wasn't just, you know, there were some ethical violations happening and spiritual abuse, but it was such a missed marketing opportunity because
Oh, yeah.
people were, open to needing healing and thinking more about God than they probably had in a very long time. So yeah, it was a wild time, that's for sure. But it's 3 years later. You said you were
Hmm.
in the Greek archdiocese at the time, or
Hmm.
the Greek jurisdiction. Did you leave that and go to another one? Are you allowed to talk about that?
Oh, sure. I did. I did. So even though Florida opened up relatively quickly, the Greek archdiocese, which was under here, the Greek churches are under the Metropolitan of Atlanta. They
Okay.
continued to be locked down much longer than was required. So
Hmm.
um, the great Jim Jatras once said, it's one thing to grudgingly comply; it's another thing to double down.
Yeah.
And that's what they did. They doubled down. So even after the state opened up, they didn't. So yeah, I moved on. We actually had a small parish, an Antiochian parish that's was actually much closer than the parish we were going to, and I'd gotten into the Greek archdiocese because the children love the parish. The parish is everything you'd want in an Orthodox parish. It's got the big dome with Christ the Pantocrator. It's beautiful. Had a lot of children and youth activities that were going on there, and there's some beautiful people there, and I love the priest.
Hmm.
But with everything going on, we found a safe haven much closer to home. So in the Antiochian Archdiocese, there was a lot more freedom at the local parish level, particularly in Florida, because we were done with all of the craziness at that point.
Right.
So we started attending there, and made good friends, and sort of stayed. And it was really, we made the decision to go before Archbishop Elpidophoros began to become the cringeworthiness that we know him to be now.
Hmm.
This was before the BLM riots and all that. And there's nothing that has happened in the past few years that has made me, even for a second, regret my decision to switch out of the Greek Archdiocese.
Right. You're talking about doubling down. Well, here we are 3 years later. It's like triple down, quadruple down.
Hmm.
This is not me thinking I'm a saint or a sinless person, but I don't feel
Hmm.
like I know in my heart and in my brain that they should be seeking forgiveness and probably down on their knees begging for it. But it's like,
Oh,
no, we're still
absolutely.
so evil and we're such bad guys. And then they wrap
Hmm.
that into all the critiques, anything that you believe that is traditionalist, that is
Hmm.
conservative, that is by default orthodox, makes you, this insert ad hominem or whatever.
Sure.
Well,
But they
have
got,
you
but
keep
they got
going?
that, yeah, I was just going to say, they've got that problem though at the parish level. There are so many uh, Greek Orthodox priests that are fantastic people,
Yeah,
including the one that's here, and
absolutely.
they're very Orthodox in their belief and practice, and it's um it's a real issue for them, and it's difficult, and they have a lot of, and of course several of the contributors to Orthodox Reflections are actually Greek. One's
Hmm.
an immigrant, and the other was born from Greek parents. They have such a vested interest in these parishes, many of whom are quite old, and they've worked so hard, and the parishes are beautiful. So they have all this vested interest in the buildings.
Oh,
And then, of course,
absolutely.
the priests will never get a blessing to leave.
Hmm.
So they would have to try to transfer to another jurisdiction if they wanted to. And, we all know what a canonical mess that can be if you don't have
Yeah.
proper release. So it's, Archbishop Elpidophoros and the Fortamite connection and what's going on in Constantinople, it's heartbreaking for Orthodox in general, but for a traditional Greek Orthodox priest, it's just horrible.
Yes, and I think of some ethnic Greeks I know, that were born in America. Jatras, he's in Rokor.
Mm-hmm.
George Michalopoulos of the Monachomos blog. He's in the OCA. So
Mm-hmm.
yes, laity have a little bit more flexibility, but still it's very hard.
Mm-hmm.
You're told that you're not obedient to the bishops and that you're going rogue and all these kinds of things. And
Mm-hmm.
also from a parish level, there becomes this angst of you're taking your ball and going home. Have you had any
Mm-hmm.
of that from your former parish, or are people pretty cool about it, like just like, we get it, Nicholas, we understand?
Oh no, they all get it.
Okay, good.
Everyone, yeah, everyone gets it. Now, I mean, you'll catch all kinds of judgment online,
Yeah.
but that's only to be expected. I mean, anytime we're not really, as humans, we're not really designed for online communication, which
Yeah.
I think is one of the reasons why it just brings out all the demons in you.
Hmm.
We're supposed to be face to face with someone, and so
Hmm.
face to face things are always different than they are online. But no, haven't had any problems with anybody from our former parish. We've had get-togethers where we've had others come over. Our oldest son continues in that parish,
Hmm.
and he
Okay.
continues in that parish simply because um, he for him it's normal.
Yeah.
Uh, so and that's fine. That's the closest parish for him. He's off at college. That's the closest parish. He continues there with his new wife, and they're doing great. Everyone's nice to him. We have a couple of godchildren that are still in that parish, so we haven't had any problems at all. Simply because I think everybody understands,
Yeah.
and especially, I mean, I've even talked to the priest out there multiple times. We're still friends, and he gets it too. He one time he just said, I'm trying so hard to bring people to the faith, and I just every time I feel like the senior leadership of the Greek Archdiocese just makes my life and my work that much harder.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that is excellent to know that there's good relations still, no sour grapes.
Mm-hmm.
In the case of my old parish, you know, so many of us fled, and there was already a mission in existence. It consisted of 4 people. Well, now we all
Mm-hmm.
came to this ROCOR mission, and we have on average like 75 people on Sundays now, and we
Wow.
were born out of closed doors. That's what I say. I was like, it's not rocket science. Closed doors versus open doors. It's not that hard to grasp, but there's a lot of sour grapes from our
Mm-hmm.
old parish. So I'm really happy to hear that that's not going on in your neck of the woods, because it is no fun for people that personally, and may or may not be
Mm-hmm.
your godparents, and the priest that heard your life confession and all this kind of stuff. It's just no fun. So y'all are doing something down there right in Florida. Good for y'all.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about this most recent article by Archpriest Jeffrey Coors. I believe the piece was also cross-published by Monachomos, but that is a really interesting essay. It's called "Good News from the COVID Lockdowns," from the
Mm-hmm.
COVID lockdown question mark. Give us an overview of what that says and what the reaction to that has been, and if if Father Coors has gotten some heat from it.
I don't know if he's gotten any heat from it. It has been published in several places. We got it. I think we may have had it first, but then it's been on Monachomos. It's also been on Ortho Christian. So it has definitely uh, gotten a lot of coverage. So Archpriest Jeffrey Coors is up in Canada, and so he was at a meeting, and this is kind of the way he frames the discussion. So he was at a meeting, the first meeting after of in-person clergy after the pandemic. Okay, so they were there to plan the first major event that was going to happen, first major church event, major conference, major event that was going to occur since the lockdowns. And what Archpriest Jeffrey wanted to talk about was, well, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? How can we make things better? How can we heal the scars?
Right, lessons
But
learned.
what's the lessons learned? How can we help people heal and move on? But he's in Canada, and so Canadians um, are the epitome of let's just move on. So he felt like the rest of the room, the rest of the clergy that he was talking to, didn't want to talk about anything having gone wrong. They wanted to put a happy face on the lockdown. So everything was fine. There was no problem. There are no spiritual scars from the lockdowns. And we don't want to stir up any emotions. We don't want to make things, we don't want to make anything happen going forward. Everything's great. let's just move on. They didn't want to talk about the freezing of bank accounts. They didn't want to talk about the Trudeau closing churches, particularly evangelical pastors being arrested in their church for trying to have church. They just wanted to say everything is good, everything was good, let's just move on. And so Archpriest Jeffrey obviously does not agree with that, because that's crazy. Not everything is good. We've had parishes shrink 20 to 30%, and the parishes that stayed open and continued to be bold in the face of a virus with a 99.9% survival rate, those brave souls who stood up to that, they're growing. People are showing up. They're saying, hey, you Orthodox, you were open, you're inviting. And we just had a situation on Sunday. New family came to the parish. The first thing they asked us at coffee hours, what did you do during COVID?
Yeah.
They're refugees from the Roman Catholic Church, but they wanted to know, what did you do during COVID? We told them, and they're like, oh, we'll be back next Sunday. Family with 3 children on their way to becoming Orthodox. Why? Because we didn't close when everyone else did. So this idea that the rest of these clergy were putting forward to Archpriest Jeffrey, that there's no trauma here, there's nothing to heal from, there's nothing to get over. Sorry, no.
Yeah.
So the rest of the article was 7 spiritual lessons that Archpriest Jeffrey wanted to share with everybody that he personally learned from the lockdowns and from the COVID responses.
Yeah. And let me put on my Fortamite hat. So Fortamite, for all of y'all who don't know, and probably anybody listening to this podcast already knows what that is. Even my Protestant and Catholic and non-religious listeners by this point know what a Fortamite is. So this is what I would say to that uppity priest who's making everything so political. Oh, and these people who visit your parish, how dare they be so ideological to ask such a question at trapeza, or a coffee hour? I mean, this should just be about spiritual matters only. This is what they do. That's a really great question to ask at your first time visiting an Orthodox church, in my opinion. Truth in advertising. What did you do before we move forward? Because we're open to Orthodoxy, but what about this parish? This is what they do. They take things that are existential, obviously spiritual matters, like culture and lockdowns and jabs and all that kind of stuff. And of course they say, you're being political. Do you get that a lot? Is that like the biggest beef that you get from the subversives online, that you're political?
Sure. Yeah. Actually, lately, the biggest beef we've gotten has been, who are you guys to criticize the Patriarch of Constantinople, who is the spiritual leader of the Orthodox Church?
Okay, what's your answer to that?
Well, he is important historically because he was the bishop of the imperial household, which was in Constantinople. But we don't have that empire anymore. And he is the direct bishop of 5,000 people, who are what's left of the Greek population there in Turkey. And to be honest, most Orthodox Christians do not care what he says, where he is, or what he has to say about anything, really. He is pumped up by the press. He's pumped up by the Western security establishment, because they found the British first at the turn of the 20th century, but also the United States in the 1950s discovered that office could be useful from a geopolitical basis.
Yeah.
And so we don't have a pope. He is not even approaching a pope. And who we are to criticize him? Well, when we criticize him, we're often quoting a different patriarch, the Patriarch of Jerusalem, Patriarch of Antioch. So who we are individuals who have a background in Orthodoxy, but many of us also have a background in geopolitics. We're multilingual, and many of us have worked outside the United States or even been born outside the United States. We understand that what the Patriarch of Constantinople is doing is serving his globalist masters. He's not spreading Orthodoxy. And Elpidophoros is in the same boat. One of the big criticisms we have with Elpidophoros was, okay, you marched at a BLM rally and you talked about systemic racism, and you didn't invite one.
right there 1 second.
Mhm.
When I just want to say, when he sang the Patriarch of Constantinople for
Mhm.
all of you all and Rio Linda, as Rush Limbaugh used to say,
Mhm.
his name is Bartholomew.
Mhm.
And then LP DeForos is, what is his title? The head of the Greek church
So he's
outside
the
of Greece,
archbishop.
right?
Yeah, he's the archbishop of the Greek archdiocese here in the United States.
Okay. But he's a bigwig even when it comes to just
Mhm.
Greek Orthodoxy around the globe.
He's a big wig for us. I mean, the
Okay.
Church of Greece is autocephalous, and so
Okay.
they have their own governing structure. 1920s, when what's called the disaster, the disaster in Asia Minor occurred, or Asia Minor disaster. That's when the Greeks had been attempting to spread from Greece back into what was the collapsing Ottoman Empire, or collapsed Ottoman Empire at that point. It had been Ataturk had reorganized it. So they were trying to take back Constantinople. They were trying to take back Greek areas. And they were soundly and completely defeated by the Ottomans. And there was a population exchange, and there was a much hardship, much death, much destruction. Okay. At that point, the Patriarch of Constantinople suddenly reached into his bag of tricks, pulled out 28th canon of Chalcedon, and claimed that a canon that was over 1,000 years old somehow gave him the right to own all the lands that were not currently organized under an Orthodox church. So the entire world mission field, from Japan to the United States to Latin America, he, the Patriarch of Constantinople, only he had the right to organize churches there. And so what had been originally a church that was going to be organized under the Church of Greece passed to Constantinople. So the Greek
Okay.
archdiocese in the United States is not actually under the Greek
Greece.
church.
Okay.
It's under him. But I just wanted to say, though, what I was saying about Elpidophoros, Archbishop Elpidophoros, one of our big criticisms of him wasn't so much that he marched with BLM. Sure,
Mhm.
it's a Marxist organization that has turned out to be just a giant grift. But we said, you went to speak in front of all of those African Americans, and you didn't invite one of them to church. You didn't tell one of them about the amazing African saints. You marched carrying a BLM sign. You didn't march carrying an icon of African saints.
Right.
So are
Yeah.
you an archbishop, or are you a politician? If you're an archbishop, we need to get them into the church. Why didn't you preach to them about joining the church? Not one thing about Jesus Christ in his entire speech. It was all about politics.
Yeah. And the GORA, this Greek Orthodox Church in
Mm-hmm.
America under LP DeForos,
Mm-hmm.
being very warm and comfortable with the deep state, Washington, D.C., and then of
Mm-hmm.
course Bartholomew over in Constantinople, and then Nicholas having told us what he's already told us about that history. Well, shocker, the GOA and LP are really into homosexuality,
Mm-hmm.
and the rainbow stuff and the sparkle creed and whatever they're doing these days. So I mean, did that happen overnight? I've only known about orthodoxy since 2016, or has that been like a drip, drip, drip thing, or is it just one of those things that's been amped up like everything else?
It's been drip. And
Okay.
yes, it has amped up recently, but so I first became aware of, the Orthodox Christian Studies Center, for example,
That's at
probably,
Fordham. Yeah.
yeah, at Fordham, probably 2009, 2010 timeframe.
Okay.
And I first became aware of them because me and some friends were writing articles about the ongoing problems with Metropolitan Joan and the OCA. So he was a very dynamic leader. We respected him a lot. And it was very clear that it was cultural issues like his opposition to same-sex marriage that had motivated quite a bit of the third column that was working against him in the OCA.
Hmm.
And so we were writing and reaching out, networking, supporting him. And that's when we came across a group of organized academics over in the Greek Archdiocese that were actively promoting changes to the Orthodox faith. And They were originally, it's always follows a pattern. We're going to ask questions. We're not advocating this, but we're going to ask questions about same-sex marriage, same-sex relationships. We're asking questions. And then it goes from asking questions, which is where we're at back in that day. It goes to, well, why not?
Right.
Well, we've asked the questions. You guys don't have any compelling answers except for tradition, but we need an explanation for the tradition. So
Right.
why not ordain women? Why not bless same-sex marriages? And they were at first, before El Petaforas, they were very much a revolution within form. They wanted to speak to their own supporters. They used code words, but they wanted to make sure that they didn't panic the regular normies who were paying, praying, and obeying. They didn't want to panic us, so they would kind of try to keep that away. For some reason, last 2-3 years, they've gone into overdrive.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's the ongoing conversion into orthodoxy that threatens to swamp them. I'm not sure exactly what's kicked this off, but now they're really full on. So now you see them publishing books, for example, on getting beyond the gender binary that's being published under the Orthodox Christian Studies Center there at Fordham. That's an actual book. You see these things coming out now. So it seems like it's gone into overdrive, but it was 10 years of drip, 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 slowly moving the Overton window within the church, slowly pushing it. And now it's just like a torrent.
Yeah. It's completely unhinged. So one of their darlings, Sarah Riccardi Schwartz, who I lovingly call hyphen girl, um, we're planning a conference for the Ludwell Orthodox Fellowship, of which I'm a co-founder. And some dude on Twitter, some angry guy named Lazarus, wanted to just, hey, we should keep an eye on these people. Sometimes I think we should tell the FBI. And then Sarah Riccardi Schwartz, this respected academic who's been on Ancient Faith Radio, and she works at Northeastern University, and her husband's the subdeacon, or at least was, who knows. Well, she retweets it and tags the FBI. Literally a conference of Orthodox Christians for inquirers. We're a missions organization. And I think that's why she's so unhinged. We, as in the collective people like me and you and anybody like us, we don't care that they hate us. And we also, one of the things I like to do is mock these academics because they think they're just the smartest people in the room. And so recently, when she wrote a piece going off on Father Peter, I think she mentioned me. I haven't even read the piece, but somebody told me about it. I could so care less about what this fool thinks, but that I was anti-intellectual because I'm always picking on academics, and I'm anti-education because I believe in homeschooling and think that government schools are a train wreck, So
Absolutely.
this is what they do. I think it's people who keep doing what we're doing. We keep being Orthodox. We keep personally trying to grow in our faith and then spread Orthodoxy to other people and just to do our thing, just to be normal Orthodox people. And they hate it. They just hate it that they can't have an influence over us. I mean, do you see it? Because y'all have a really bold website. I mean, it's just top of the line. I mean, is this what you get to? You're stupid. Who are you? Y'all are just a bunch of nobodies. I mean, what do y'all get from this organized academic entourage?
Well, they try to ignore us as much as possible, and when they do engage with us, they're very disingenuous. So before I move on, to address that point, though, I just want to say that exchange on Twitter with Sarah Riccardi Schwartz about the FBI, that was so shocking that we screen captured that and we put it into one of our articles.
Yeah.
And I made sure to link to another article that one of our contributors had written, Never Talk to Police. It was a whole article that we published in Orthodox Reflections about your right to remain silent, how you have to affirm that right. You can't simply remain silent. You must affirmatively state you're remaining silent and never talk to police. I think this is something that as we continue to go forward, we learn more about the weaponization, particularly the FBI. I think all Orthodox Christians owe it to themselves to brush up on your criminal rights as people, we tend to be good people. We tend to want to help those in authority. We don't like to keep secrets,
Oh, we're such
but
rule followers, like to a fault.
we can't. That is going to send you to jail
Yeah.
under the wrong circumstances. And just ask several of these anti-abortion protesters or anyone who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time on January 6th. Not a good idea. So don't talk to police. She's one who's vocal, but there are Karens everywhere
Oh, yeah.
who would report you. And especially, we just ran a piece on central bank digital currency and the debanking, and several anti-COVID activists have lost their personal bank accounts in addition to business. We have to be aware of where we're at here.
Yeah.
Okay. So as far as the academics are concerned, when it comes to us, let me give you an example of this. So for example, Aristotle, who is, I think he's one of the directors, co-director perhaps of the Orthodox Christian Study Center at Fordham.
See,
No, that's George.
Okay.
That's
Yeah,
George.
what's Aristotle's last name?
Kalu, I think.
Okay, Pap.
Yep. Let's
Oh,
just
Pap.
call him Aristotle. Some of the other Greeks call him Telly, so that may be his nickname, like
Okay.
Telesavalos. Okay.
Okay.
But I was engaging with him. Okay. And I said to him, on this particular occasion, I said to him, look, we don't have any confidence in this deaconess movement for a variety of reasons. But number one, we know what deaconesses did historically. No one is willing to tell us what the deaconess are supposed to do if we bring them back. So what are they supposed to do? So he calls me a liar. He says, no, you're lying. The deaconess center has a whole list of duties that they could perform. And I said, okay, well, that list of duties that you put on your website, Public Orthodoxy, and I screen capped and I put it there and I said, so we're going to have deaconesses as part of the liturgy, because it says liturgical service. We're going to have deaconesses take communion to women who are sick and cannot attend liturgy. So now we have women Eucharistic ministers. And I just went through that list and I said, are you supporting all these? And then I reminded him, just a week ago, you actually published a piece by Sister Vanessa in which you advocated for female ordination. So when we tell you that we're look at deaconesses and we don't trust that you're not using it as a halfway house towards women priests, and you tell us we're crazy, but then you publish it on your own website.
Oh, yeah.
And so then he blocked me. So, I mean,
Right.
That's kind of the pattern. They know we're watching.
Mhm.
They know we're publishing about them. There's nothing they can do about that, but they don't necessarily want to engage us. Sarah Riccardi Schwartz did criticize us by name once, but for the most part, they try to ignore us. And if we do catch them, if we do get them into a corner where they know that we're watching, we're paying attention, that we can chew bubble gum and walk, then they just usually disengage. Because what are they going to do? I mean, they're in the Orthodox Church and they're advocating changing the Orthodox Church.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, it reminds me of the old joke. You go up to an Orthodox bishop, you ask, okay, how many Orthodox bishops does it take to change a light bulb?
Mm-hmm.
And the response is change. What's this change? So they're completely out of step with their own church.
Right.
But they don't want to be Episcopalian. They want to make us Episcopalian, but with better liturgies.
Right. And again, this is why, content creators like us and ones that were pointed out by Father David Galloway in his now infamous speech against traditionalist content creators in the Diocese of the South Conference for the OCA. It's because we call them out on it. We know, I mean, there's an old saying, don't pee down my leg and tell me it's raining. Like, we know what's up. This is a Pandora's box. And again, for people who aren't Orthodox, this was a deacon or a deaconess. It is it's clergy, and that would just be the Pandora's box opening up to female ordination. So we have female priests. We do not have female priests. We don't even have female altar servers. Now, I do hear in some places in the Northeast there are female altar servers, but I've never seen one anywhere I go, and it certainly would never fly in the churches I go to. So that's what that all is, the Pandora's Box, right?
Sure. And we did have, in all fairness, I mean, we did have an office of deaconess because it was considered unseemly for priests to be in close physical contact with women when they were performing baptisms. And so deaconesses perform primarily assistance in baptism, being in physical contact with women. A lot of these things change, of course, because you quit baptizing tens of thousands of people a year, because you've already so thoroughly evangelized a society that baptisms are performed on primarily babies because they're being born into families that have already been
Right.
baptized. But yeah, at this point, this is an office of the church, died out because we didn't really have any need for it anymore
Yeah, I mean, we're
because of
talking
circumstances.
early on in Christianity.
Very early, yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. So uh, just back to a little bit more about Hyphen Girl. You know, she mentions me all the time. It's insane. And I think it's because I'm kind of the gift that keeps on giving. You know, I'm not just Orthodox. I'm not just in the Russian church, but I'm, you know, a co-founder of the Ludlow Orthodox Fellowship, and we're having a conference, and I'm Southern Without Apology and all this kind of thing. So I think it was in the persecution of Roman Catholic Bishop Strickland is a warning to the Orthodox. That's the name of your article. I think it was in that article where you have the screenshot that she retweeted it. You know what you should do if you have time to go back in and edit? You should put a cut line under that little photo caption that says, if you want to stick it to Hyphen Girl, register for our conference, and put a link.
I have no problem doing that. Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks for the suggestion.
you're
No
welcome.
issue.
Thanks for the work, right,
No,
Rebecca?
no issue. Yeah.
So let's pivot a little. I'm sure we'll come circle back to some of these other things. You recently ran a piece by Walt Garlington, who is a good friend. I've never met him in real life, but he contributes to the fellowship website, southernorthodox.org, and a very interesting piece called Americanism versus Christianity. And before I ask you about that, I believe this is on y'all's about page where it says, we believe it is time for the Orthodox Church, as the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, to fulfill her rightful mission on these shores, the salvation of all, and building a truly native indigenous Orthodox culture. That's speaking my language there. Talk about that blurb from your about page, and then maybe what Walt's article is about.
Sure. So within, and this is something that I actually learned from attending a lecture from an actual Greek academic, was a concept of enculturation. Okay, he had done a very lengthy paper on this, and he presented it at a conference that I was at, and it was a very eye-opening. So we tend to think Serbian or Romanian or Russian, we think of them as Orthodox cultures. Well, they didn't spring from heaven. They didn't drop from heaven as fully formed Orthodox cultures. Every one of these cultures was absolutely pagan. And there were elements of human sacrifice and all of the other things that you would expect from deep early paganism. So how on earth do you get 1,000 years later a culture that we just take for granted that is just Orthodox? And it's called, the process that was presented was enculturation. So you encounter the culture and you change and transform the culture much the way we transform individuals who have been received into the church, who are in an ongoing relationship with Jesus Christ, who are using the tools, spiritual tools the church has given you of confession, of communion, of repentance, prayer. So the evangelists, the Orthodox evangelists, would come in and they would separate the wheat from the chaff in the culture much the same way we separate the wheat from the chaff in an individual. There are some things you just have to change if you're going to be a Christian. There are some things that the culture has to change. So they would wrap the gospel around the culture, and they would keep what they could keep, transform what they needed to transform, and throw away the things that just had to go. And the historical process of that was very consciously done. They meant that the Serbians were going to be fully and totally Christianized. They meant for the same thing to occur to the Romanians, the Bulgarians. It was not happenstance. Okay, well, here in the United States, the Russian church, prior to St. Tikhon being recalled to Moscow, the Russian church was consciously following that same model. It goes to Alaska and creates written languages for multiple of the indigenous people and translates everything into those unique indigenous languages. So the Russian church was pursuing that model of enculturation. We're going to make the gospel local. Now, that doesn't mean doing cheesy things like suddenly changing Jesus's icon and making Jesus look like he's an Aleut. That would be crazy. Jesus was a specific person born at a specific time in a specific location. So if you start to toy with things like how we present him in iconography, what you're essentially doing is you're saying he never existed. He's an idea. We can make him anything you like.
Right.
So there's a limit to this as far as enculturation is concerned. But that was a specific and intentional model that broke down after St. Tikhon went back to Moscow. The churches then, the old world churches, began to found their own churches, and it became an ethnic model. And rather than trying to engage the American culture, rather than trying to transform the American culture, they became ethnic redoubts for several decades, in which the concern was, how do we preserve a Greek culture that's actually foreign to the American shores? How do we preserve an Arab culture that's foreign to the American shores? And now, since the 70s and 80s, and I think the Antiochians have been really good at this, and ROCOR as well, which, I mean, the church has Russian in the title. You would think it would be ethnic, but it's not. It's absolutely not. That refers to the origin of faith kind of that was brought here, not to the people. But now we're really focused now. I think we're starting to really focus that our job is the Great Commission, that American culture, there are good aspects to it. So what Waltz did in his article was he said, this overarching kind of synthetic American culture, maybe that's not authentic enough for us to transform. Maybe we need to look closer at some of the more regional cultures that are hiding underneath this kind of LeBron James, I think he mentioned, and NFL kind of overarching, kind of vacuous kind of Americanism. And let's look deeper at the soil, at the people connected to specific places, the people who really aren't going anywhere and who have a deep yearning for the type of spirituality that Orthodoxy provides. And I think Walt had some good ideas there. Yeah. It does somewhat offset some of the other things that have been said on the website, but that's okay. Eventually, we're going to get our act totally together. But in the meantime, we're discussing concepts.
Yeah.
But I think everything we need to be focused on transforming America. And I support, for example, Share the Faith, which is a mission priest fund. It's dedicated to helping missions found and being able to afford a full-time priest, or as much of a full-time priest as we can fund, or could be funded. And so I think we're moving in the right direction in that regard. We're now really focused in on that. One of the articles I wrote not too long ago was about Thanksgiving as a fast. Yeah, I don't think you face it as ROCOR, because Thanksgiving typically comes after. I'm sorry, the Christmas fast typically starts after Thanksgiving on the old calendar, right?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. But see, on all the other jurisdictions, technically you're supposed to be fasting on Thanksgiving Day.
Yeah.
But what do? Well, we get a dispensation every year. And my point is if you're getting a dispensation every year, through economia, or through the right of the pastor to kind of make concessions for the good of his people, why are you doing that? Right. It's every year. It's been every year. It's been the same fourth Thursday in November since FDR. Yeah. We're pushing 100 years. Make it a feast day. Right. Make it a feast day. Write a liturgy. Make it a feast day. And then, some people, particularly the really ethnic ones, will push back and they'll go, well, it's a fake government holiday. Yes, it's a fake government holiday until we put the turkey in the baptismal font and we make it ours.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there anything wrong with having a day of Thanksgiving? No. Well, then let's have a day of Thanksgiving.
Yeah. I like that. I'll have to find that article. I don't think I've read it. I'll read that and I'll link to it. And one of the things that you were talking about, like enculturation, a huge thing with the fellowship, but also regionalism. America is gigantic. It is 4 time
Mhm.
zones. It is what are we at? 340 million people at this point. You
Does that
know,
count all the illegals?
yeah. Who the heck knows? A lot of people and a lot of different
Mhm.
subcultures, right? And
Mhm.
that's one of the things that we've gotten a little bit of pushback with. Well, why are you just doing it for the South? The Midwest needs a fellowship. Yeah, we want to be the model for that. Start one.
Mhm.
What about the
Mhm.
Pacific Northwest? Yep, we support you. Go for it.
Mhm.
So it's like I don't know anything about Seattle or Portland other than I don't want to live there. Why would I want to have a fellowship for people who live out there? I know the South, and
Mhm.
particularly the Southeast. So it's like it just makes sense. And I don't think there's been that much pushback against that anymore. But in the beginning, when we first launched the website, people were kind of, well, I kind of like this, but it seems so exclusive. And it's like, well, it is. Start your own.
Mhm.
It's only
Yeah.
exclusive that it has to do with this region, but it's not just for native Southerners. It's for
Mhm.
people who live here and love it and have their children here and make it their home. It
Mhm.
is not, there's no racial test. There's no, you know, oh, tell me who your great great grandpappy was, and whatever. Did he fight for the Confederacy? There's no kind of test like that. It's,
Mhm.
is the South your home? Do you love it? And do you want to help spread orthodoxy, or do you want to hear more about it? That's the gist. That's it.
Pretty much. It's what's ironic are the people that lecture you about diversity are the ones who want everybody to be the same. They're
Right.
the ones who practice conformity. And what you're advocating for is true diversity. God
Yep.
loves diversity. Ever taken a look at the animal kingdom? God
Mhm.
had a ball with all that. So he loves God loves diversity. So we don't try to I don't try to make everyone think like I do. And you're not doing it either. So yeah, you know the South, you're from the South, so let someone from the Pacific Northwest do their own thing. And
Yep.
you're going to celebrate that. If they have a good article, you'd link to it. You'd if they asked you to republish something good, you'd republish it. You'd interview them
Yeah.
because they're doing their thing for God, where you're doing your thing for God. There's everyone does not have to be the same.
Right. Yeah, Americanism, right? It doesn't
Hmm.
have to be a thing. So another thing you had mentioned too, speaking of enculturation, well, culture, everybody used to agree there was a culture war, whether or not,
Hmm.
you know I mean, this was like 5 minutes ago, whether or not you were for fighting it or,
Hmm.
for destroying every piece of the culture. But
Hmm.
now there's this weird pivot that there is no such thing as the culture war. Is there even such a thing as culture? Well, gosh darn it, the culture war is just a distraction. Just go hang out in your prayer corner more and all these kinds of things. And it's like, culture is everything. So
Right.
I think Walt did a really good job kind of defining
Hmm.
what culture is. And I wrote a chapter for the book, The Honorable Cause, and I tried to describe what culture is too and why it is so pivotal. It's the foundation of everything.
Hmm.
So that's a really good article. I will link to it. Anything else you want to say about that before we move on?
So I guess just a couple things. I mean, number one, yeah, we have a section on our website right now that sweeps up a bunch of articles. It is called Culture War. It's in our top menu. But culture war shouldn't exist.
Yeah.
I mean, this is not. We talk about this as being left wing, right wing, moderate. We use political labels for this. This shouldn't be politics. Sexually mutilating 2-year-olds
Hmm.
because the boy wants to play with a Barbie. But the boy play with the Barbie, and then just when he gets older and his friends are making fun of him, he'll figure it out. But
Yeah.
you're going to go put him on cross-sex hormones because of this. These are this most of what goes under the label of culture war is actually a war against insanity. We're just trying to push back against craziness. It's not political. It's only political to the extent that they're trying to completely deconstruct your entire civilization so that they can rebuild it in a Marxist image. To
Hmm.
that extent, it's political. But politics is arguing over roads, bridges. Politics is arguing over tax rates. Okay,
Yeah.
that's politics, and I would dearly, dearly love to get back to that. So and good Orthodox Christians can be on both sides of all those political issues. There's lots of political issues that occupied our ancestors and our parents, decades ago. They were fighting over, we had fights over taxes and things like that, but we never had fights over gay marriage. We didn't have fights over whether or not minor attracted persons are a legitimate minority. They're called pedophiles. They're not. They have to be kept away from our children. So the culture war, on the one hand, gets caught up in this politics, but for us, it's not politics. It's just us pushing back against the insanity. We know the insanity is weaponized in order, the same way that it was weaponized under other Marxist revolutions. They always get the outcasts, the crazy people. Those are the foot soldiers of the revolution. We get it. But we would love to be in a normal kind of political environment where we're fighting over things that are actually political, and these aren't. But the other thing is, it is weaponized also to take away from the fact that we have some really horrible economic problems. And so while all of these issues, the sexual mutilation of children, the public pornography that passes for a pride parade, all of the other things that they're using to weaponize and destroy our culture, those things are very important. But at the same time, we have to focus on the fact that central bank digital currency is a thing, and they're trying to completely control your access to your own money. We have to focus on
that's your most recent article, isn't it?
Absolutely. So we have to be able to focus on all these things at one time. Yes, we have to push back on a culture war perspective, but we can't let the powers that be, the globalist elites, distract us from the fact that they're also pushing forward on economics, regulatory, national integration, the WHO treaty for pandemics response. Basically, it's a hard time to be alive because there are so many things that you have to pay attention to at one time.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm of the thinking that all of these, I even hate to say even something like talking about the Fed or something is even political because it has ramifications for our life and banking. Well, what if Nicholas from Orthodox Reflections goes too far? We're just going to debank him. Well, of course, that's stopping you from speaking about these matters that are strictly faith issues. I mean, to me, it's all the same thing because it's all the same people wanting to tear down Christianity and tear down anybody defending it or just trying to be left alone, not even like out there as a content creator, just literally wanting to be left alone. And you can't be, it's just a constant assault. Like you said, it's weaponized. So I don't know. I kind of don't even like to call anything political. I'm like, it's all political. So, I mean, it's all cultural, it's all political. And what does it matter,
Right. It's all become political.
Right.
And I would like dearly, I've been active in local politics. I love local politics because local politics is all about
that's awesome.
Getting that road paved.
Yeah.
Okay. I need this service or that. It really and truly, local politics gets back to kind of that Jeffersonian era where what happened at the city hall really mattered, and what happened at Washington, D.C. was, well, that was 1,000 miles away and nobody cared.
Right.
But we get back to local politics is pure politics. There's no culture war aspect. I'm in a little town in the middle of the South, and there is no abortion clinic. There will never be an abortion clinic. It wouldn't survive if they put one up. These things just aren't here. So when we go to town hall, we're arguing over the budget. We're arguing over all the things that God meant for us to fight over.
Yeah.
Because we all come from a common cultural background. So the culture is over here and completely safe, and no one's getting involved in that. And instead we're arguing over things that you can build a case for. You can build an affirmative case for why we should spend this money and not that money. And everyone kind of, goes and has a beer afterwards because it's not an existential threat to your life. We've now, culture hangs in the balance now. And so every one of these elections now at a federal level is presented as existential. If it goes the wrong way, we're all doomed. And the problem is they could be right.
Right.
We could actually be all doomed. I mean, you've got a party in this country that's dedicated to nuclear war,
Right.
courting actual nuclear war, or actually taking away all of your civil liberties. So I would love to live long enough to see us get this settled. But the only way we're going to get that settled is if we all have a common cultural framework.
Yep.
And I think Orthodoxy is what eventually provides that. If enough of us are converted to Orthodoxy, enough Americans are converted to Orthodoxy, that doesn't mean we're all going to think alike. That means we're all going to agree on everything. But it means that on the big questions, those are settled. So we're arguing over things that we can still have a beer afterwards.
Right. Yeah. So my chapter in the Honorable Cause said exactly that. So it would be, if you can have secession as much as you want, you can have these, localist political victories, and that's all great. That's all good stuff, but they're temporary. What's going to make it last? And that's been the Achilles heel for this thing called the South from the beginning. There was, sure, most people were, little Orthodox Christians, but there was no cohesion with that. And so even when the war happened, they created this thing called the South and Dixie and gave it a national consciousness. There was still not enough cohesion without the bedrock of having a shared faith. So that's my hope and prayer. That's what I want for the fellowship. I mean, that's what I want for everyone on planet Earth. But, I want to baptize what's here because they're my people, So,
Sure.
Speaking
Absolutely.
of the conference, are you coming, sir? Are you going to come to the conference?
Unfortunately, I cannot, because it conflicts with one of my work trips that's forcing me to leave the South.
Bummer.
So
man.
I wish I could make it. Hope everybody, particularly from the South, can. But unfortunately, this year I can't make it. I also had a work trip that I wanted to go to up to Montanica, I think is how it's pronounced. But unfortunately, I had a work trip that conflicted with that one also. But I'm getting older, and hopefully I'll work less, and so I'll have time to go to the second annual conference. I'd love to be there. I'd love to see everybody.
Well, God willing, there will be a second one, I think, once this first one becomes a success. And I really do think God's hand is at work, because we've had a few stumbling blocks, but it is happening. And so anyway, we're going to record it, the audio and all that stuff. So, I'll share that with you when you're done, and maybe you can put it up at your site because it's going to be glorious.
Oh, I'll be happy to.
Well,
love to. Absolutely. Is Jim going to talk? Jim Jatras, is he coming? Is he going to have a speech?
When we were kind of deciding on the pool of possible speakers, people who would attend and possibly say yes, I had mentioned it to Jim, and he just said, I'm going to come, Rebecca. I will be there. But he said, I just don't feel right speaking. And I said, really? He's like, well, I'm not from the South. I said, well, that doesn't matter. You've lived here a long time and raised your family here, and you love Virginia. And he just said no, but he is attending. Yeah.
Wonderful.
He's so sweet. He's such a gentleman. Oh, I should tell people I have not, we're working out the details now, but it is absolutely finalized. So I'm going to mention it here first to you. You'll be the first to know outside of my small circle, but Metropolitan Jonah is speaking. Yep.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, that by itself is worth the price of admission.
Yeah. And
I was
at,
Keep on. I was just going to say, I had the privilege to meet Metropolitan Jonah a couple times. He's on my personal email list. He is fantastic. Love Metropolitan Jonah.
He had a something that was on his calendar, and he rearranged it for us. But you had mentioned him earlier in this talk. So, he's from California, but, he lives in the South. He lives in Virginia. He has a monastery and a thriving parish in Virginia, so it's like, I don't know what he's going to talk about, but it's going to be awesome. So I'm really excited. Yeah. So I think we'll definitely have a second conference. Okay. Let me say one thing I really like about your website. A lot of times you do like these lists, like even Father Coors had done like the 7 things to do. Cause sometimes you read this thing and it's a lot of information, but I like the way like you'll organize your stuff. You had recently the 3 harmful myths most Christians believe about Judaism. I know you've talked with Buck Johnson about that, and that's coming out soon, so we don't have to do
Mhm.
a deep dive on that. That could be its own show, which I assume you've done with Buck. But you had that article really good and succinct. You have like 8 lies told by enemies of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. Just boom, boom, boom,
Mhm.
links, information. Was that like by design, or is that just the way you think? Because those are really useful essays.
Mm. It's absolutely 100% by design.
Okay.
So we're dealing with a lot of millennials. We're dealing
Hmm.
with a lot of Zoomers that are gonna read the site, and so the whole TLDR, the too long didn't read piece,
Those are
that's
all
an
of my
addition.
essays.
Well, so it just part of what I do for a living is giving speeches and educating and on several different topics. And so I do a lot of interactive, and I realized years ago that we were even probably 5-10 years ago, I was already noticing a shrinking of attention span.
Hmm.
And so I felt like when we start to organize these articles, and I've counseled other contributors on this, and so you'll notice it shows up across multiple contributors now, that everyone, 3 to 5 minutes in, a lot of Zoomers are like already checking the scroll bar on the right, or they're checking it on their phone. How long is this? Am I going to commit another 4 or 5 minutes to reading this article?
Hmm.
Well, if it's a list, you maybe have an introduction to the list, but if it's a list, they know that if they're on 6 and there's only 8, they're like, okay, I guess I can get another couple more.
Right.
So it helps to organize it, um, give it transition internally, internal cohesion, but it also, it for the audience, it tends to help the abandonment rate of an article.
Hmm.
Because if you get the statistics, you'll realize that on even a 2 to 5,000 word article, a lot of people are going to abandon it after the first 4 or 5 paragraphs. They're just
Yeah.
going to take off. So the list is there to keep it organized, coherent, but also to signal to the reader, okay, you're almost there. You're
Yeah.
almost there, guy. Keep
One
going.
one
You've
more
almost
lap.
made it. Just one more point, one more point. And it also helps in social media, because if you'll notice, a lot of times, like on the lies that are told about the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, a lot of times someone will say, well, it's a Russian church on Twitter, or they'll say it on Gab, or they'll say it someplace else. We can just say, see lie number 3, and then link to the article. So if you don't want to read it, that's fine. Just click the link and go right to number 3. And it says right there, Ukrainian Orthodox Church is a self-governing Ukrainian church led by Ukrainians for Ukrainians.
Mhm.
It's not Russian. And here's all the supporting evidence behind that. And so it gives me a way of referencing anyone else who's working any of our social media accounts. We can post that and we can reference something specific. And so they don't want to commit to reading the entire article, that's fine. Just skip down till you see the big number 3.
Right. It's smart. It's really, really smart. So yeah, I'll probably just link to every darn thing that we've referenced from your site. But we got a few more minutes. Let's talk about how will the martyrdom of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church impact the world.
Mm-hmm.
That one, and then also just you've done so many good articles on the persecution of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. So sometimes people's eyes glaze over despite our best intentions to tell people who
Mm-hmm.
aren't Orthodox why this matters geopolitically, socially, here at home. If you're a Christian of any sort, there are ramifications for you, even if you don't know who all these players are.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of talk about and increasing persecution of traditionalists and specifically Christians in America. And I don't think it's coming. I think it's already here.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of what's your take on that? Like, how do you pull people in, like maybe in a conversation, like your elevator pitch, like, okay, why is this important to you?
Mm-hmm. Well, let me tie something together real quick as we get started. So
Okay.
one of the great weapons, for example, against the Ukrainian Orthodox Church has been seizure of money and freezing of bank accounts.
Uh-huh.
So that's something that was pioneered by Trudeau during the trucker strike.
Hmm.
But everything is connected in the globalist stage, and so they field test these these strategies in different locations and before they start to roll it out. It's almost like a software rollout. We'll do a soft launch over here, and then if things go well, we'll roll it out. So we're facing that here. I mean, you're going to face issues with being able to stay in Airbnb or use PayPal or sell your merchandise on Etsy. All of these big tech and big finance companies are all gathered together under common ownership of BlackRock and Vanguard. And so the things that are happening to the Christians in Ukraine, they're happening. They're facing physical seizure of churches, but they're also facing seizure of their money, inability to actually pay salaries, inability to buy food. There are organizations that are delivering food to monks because they can't buy any food. They don't have any money. Their bank accounts are frozen. So there's whatever you see happening outside the United States in terms of Christian persecution, be assured that if it's in one of the states that we have a hand in, that our government is included in it. Our government is behind it. And you're going to be potentially facing that very shortly, if not already facing it.
Right.
But as far as the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, martyrdom is important. You know, and like we said, martyrdom transforms the world. When you see Christians who are willing to stand up and say no, not only to their own government out of Kiev, but to say no to the American globalist empire. They're saying no. They're saying no to NATO. No, we won't leave these churches. No, you have to drag us out. If you're going to arrest us, you're going to arrest us. If you're going to try to starve us, you can try to starve us. We're not leaving, and we're not going to become bitter. We're not going to become angry. We're not going to turn into revolutionaries. We're not going to go pick up discarded AK-47s from the battlefield. We're going to oppose you through Christ. And they have the processions. They outlaw the processions. They have them anyway. They tell them they have to leave. They don't. They hit them with tear gas and drag them out of the church. They organize in the cemetery across from the church and continue the service.
Yeah.
And we've seen nothing like that. There's Christian martyrdom all over the world, but it doesn't have the same impact on us because it's happening in Muslim countries where we're not seeing the images, we're not seeing the videos. They don't have a YouTube channel. Where it's happening in Africa, but we don't see it. We don't have the coverage. But this is happening in Europe, and we're seeing the Church of the Martyrs right before your eyes. And martyrdom is so important. And for example, it's so missing in the Roman Catholic Church that the Pope went out and appropriated, the Oriental Orthodox martyrs. he took somebody else's martyrs because they're not producing any. But this is a witness to the entire world. And it's also, if you hid at home, afraid to go to the chalice because of a virus with a 99.9% survival rate, well, this is now you're getting a view into what Orthodox Christianity really is. Right. You're getting a view into this because they will take the beatings. We've published videos of bishops being beaten in the streets. They'll take the beatings, the spitting, they'll take the starvation. They will not quit. And that is going to have ramifications around the world in a positive way, in my opinion. There are going to be more saints that are going to be produced. There will be martyrs that will be produced. It is an example for the entire world. And if you look at some of the evangelicals that have now gotten interested in this topic, they're starting to see orthodoxy.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you're unable to really get away from it. I mean, Tucker Carlson, that exchange between him and Mike Pence, okay? Yeah. Tucker knows about the UOC now.
Yeah.
So everybody does. So we just want to, we pointed that out in the article that, and what really actually kicked that article off was seeing the quote that was from Metropolitan Neophytos, that God is letting the suffering of the Orthodox Church in Ukraine in order to make new saints.
Yeah.
And we saw that quote and we were like, we need to do something with that.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, do you think it's a bridge too far for me saying here in America that there is Christian persecution. I mean, I think with the J6 stuff, people can see there's political persecution. And like you're saying, like Airbnb and stuff like that. A friend of mine was like, "Hey, Rebecca, I registered for the conference, but I think because, I attended January 6th, I can't get my Airbnb." I mean, this is just like a normal person. So, I mean, I don't think it's a bridge too far. And I do think there's absolutely Christian persecution. And one of the things that is a bitter pill for me is a lot of the persecution of Orthodox comes from people who are within the church. They claim to be Orthodox Christians and they push this stuff. But let me say one other thing about political persecution. My friend Ann Wilson Smith recently wrote a piece for VDare about the Torchlight Rally from Charlottesville. They're still putting people in jail over it because I guess they got a new attorney general or whatever, and he's just so into it, that it's just such a great piece because I think a lot of people by this point realize Charlottesville wasn't the white supremacist rally that it was sold to be, that they understand it was a watershed for J6 and all this kind of stuff, but that this is just, they're still putting people in jail over this. I'm talking for like 4 and 5 years. So it just reminds me of, I actually have the H.L. Mencken quote here. The trouble with fighting for human freedom is that one spends most of one's time defending scoundrels, for it is against scoundrels that oppressive laws are first made, and oppression must be stopped at the beginning if it is to be stopped at all. And I'm not saying that your average Protestant Christian thinks, the folks of the church in Ukraine are scoundrels, but they think they're foreigners and maybe they don't even think they're Christian at all. But to me, it's just so obvious. So I guess my question in a roundabout way is, do you truly think there is persecution happening here, not just at the political level, but also just specifically against traditionalist Christians?
Okay. So if you write an article for our blog and you sign your name to it and you work for a Fortune 500 company and you oppose same-sex marriage, how long is your job going to last?
Yeah.
Okay. If you write an article, write a blog and sign your name to it and you work for a Fortune 500 company and you're concerned about peace in Ukraine and concerned about the UOC, same thing. So what we did with Christian persecution in the United States is we offloaded it to the private sector. Yeah. And that's how they've been able to get around it. And we covered that, of course, and we're talking about the central bank digital currency and why we will most likely have a wholesale version of that where the big banks are maintained, and that way the government can pretend, oh, we didn't cut off your money. That was your bank made that decision, not us. Right. So what we've done is we outsource censorship. We know that through the collusion between big tech and the government. We just deep sixed your opinions. And sorry, you're being fired because you violated your terms of employment because you took a stand that is offensive to our principles, such as being anti-abortion or being anti-LGBTQ or whatever else that you did. And so when we have a discussion over Christian persecution, it's exactly what you just said. They say there is none. There is no Christian persecution. Okay, but I'm not free. My First Amendment rights are completely abridged because you will take away my job. And very shortly, we're gathering steam to take away my bank account. It gets back to, for example, during the vaccine. Now they're trying to gaslight us by saying, well, no one was forced to take the vaccine. Okay, well, you couldn't, you couldn't attend college. You couldn't keep your job. But okay, but that's not force. So we've redefined persecution the way that Bush tried to redefine torture. Oh, that's only torture if it causes organ failure or something. I mean, right. Okay, Christian persecution is only Christian persecution if you're dragged out of your house and shot in the back of the head. No, we have a chilling effect right now. People are not free to espouse their faith. We're not free because our employers who own us from 8 to 5, maybe they control our time from 8 to 5 in exchange for they pay us a salary and we provide the work that we have contracted to do. That has expanded down to where they control your online presence after 5.
Right.
And so that's Christian. All of this is Christian persecution. And we're going to, if you dig down into it, you're going to see that there are churches that have been threatened by the IRS, whereas other churches that are just as political, but they're political in an acceptable way, which is our Orthodox opponents on the, I don't want to call them left because that's a political term, but they call themselves Orthodox, but they're not. They are more political than you and I could ever dream of being. They consider everything in their Marxist worldview, everything's politics.
What do you call
They're given a
them?
pass.
I call them lefty docs just because it's, I
That's a
had to
good one.
come up with something, but I didn't know what to call them. What would be, I mean, you got to give it a label. What do you call it?
Either woke or progressive
Yeah.
is what we use on our site. But,
Yeah.
maybe one of the things we can do in future conferences is we can agree on a lexicon.
Yeah.
All the same thing. But I mean, a lot of them think of themselves as heirs to the political progressive movement of the turn of the 20th century. And so we progressive, you could call them modernists, you could call them lefty docs. What we try to do is we try to avoid the terms liberal and conservative because they are not classically liberal.
Yeah.
And conservative in American political, in American political speech, conservative just means amiable loser who,
Yes.
I'm a conservative. Oh, great. That means you support whatever the liberals or quote unquote progressives or the woke, you support whatever they did 5 years ago.
And that is such a great distinction because there's been times where, I call out priests or I'm having a debate with them or somebody's defending them. Why? He's a conservative. How dare you say that? I'm like, if that's what conservatism is, I don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. So amiable loser. I'll go with that.
Yep. Yeah.
Oh.
So yeah, it's this is the thing that also people, and I've mentioned it before, but we just think, we always talk about generals. Old generals are always trying to win the last war. They're always preparing for the last war. They just get their framework frozen. So when talking about totalitarianism, we just tend to think of the way that the Nazis did it, or we think of the way the communists did it. They closed the churches. They dynamited the churches. They tried to suppress religion. Well, Satan is deluded, but he's not dumb.
Yep.
He figured out that it didn't work. So they're not trying to do that. They're trying to co-opt the religion. And so one way of co-opting it is to slowly, by degrees, convince you that it's in your best interest not to do certain things. Yeah. Okay. Same-sex marriage is settled law. Don't preach against it. Don't work against it. Because if you do, we're going to take away your nonprofit status, or we're going to freeze your bank account, and subtly by degrees, you just let them box you into that little Overton window of acceptability. And then one day you wake up and you realize that you're the Episcopal Church with better liturgies.
Right. The velvet handcuffs, that's what I call it, because it is not freedom, true freedom. It is, a type of oppression, a type of, there are shackles. It's just, they're kind of touchy feely, sort of, kind of. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's and it really does. If you want to believe that there is no problem, I think that you're probably still in a situation now where you can convince yourself that there is no problem. And that's a lot of normie docs. And I know that, some priests don't like that term, but when I think of a normie docs, it's not a negative in my mind whatsoever. This is someone who just wants to raise good kids.
Naive. Yeah.
It's just somebody who just wants to go to work, go to liturgy, pray, go to confession, get forgiveness, and just live a normal life. And we meet these people all the time, and that's what they want, and that's what they're trying to do in this world. And they should be able to do that.
Yes.
It would be wonderful if they could, but I can understand them. They don't want to deal with this. And so you can still pretend that you're in good shape right now if you want to pretend that. Some of us,
time is ticking, though.
Time is ticking. And so some of us are in the uncomfortable position of trying to remind them that not everything is good. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And my problem with the normie docs is they have such limited time, limited, energy, and oftentimes they'll take that little bit of time and energy they have to go after people like you and me. Stop causing so much turmoil. It's like all we're doing is shining a light on it, y'all. Like we didn't invent this stuff.
No,
Anyway.
I've told many of them, look, for for the first 15 years, better than 15 years that I was Orthodox, I wrote only one type of article, why you should convert to Orthodoxy. That was the only article. That was the only type of article I ever wrote. And but when we started to hit problems originally with Metropolitan Jonah, and then additional problems came up, I wrote some other articles that were published on George's site and elsewhere.
Oh, excellent. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I've known George for years. He and I've talked on the phone many times. But so it was not by choice. I would love to go back to, 10 reasons why you should be Orthodox today. And basically every other article that we ever run is, okay, now we've expanded it to 98 reasons why you should be Orthodox today. I don't want to do this. We didn't want to do this. We write less. There's so many people out there that are attempting to preach orthodoxy, and very successfully, by the way. We do less of, okay, we're trying to get people to convert to Orthodox, even though I would love to be in that space, but there's so many people doing that. We're actually really more into, okay, speaking to the Orthodox and saying, these are things that we do need to understand. Maybe we can't even do anything about them right now, but we at least need to be as wise as serpents.
Yes,
we need to know what's there. And some, to a certain extent, we also do talk to the non-Orthodox audience, because we say, look, we don't have a pope. And so I know that they're trying to present this guy in Constantinople as being the equivalent to the pope. And you're sitting there thinking about Orthodoxy, and you might want to try it, but you're looking at what this guy's doing and you're like, oh my gosh, if that's what the Orthodox Church is about, I don't want to join. No, that's not what the Orthodox Church is about.
Right.
So
we all have subversives. Everything good on planet Earth has subversives, because like you said, the devil is smart and he works overtime. He is tireless. But I'm so glad that you do what you do, because my motto is just something's got to be said and somebody's got to do it. So I'm glad you're doing it, because y'all do it so well. And it's just the site's just lovely. And I think these are just there's no more important conversations to be having than the devil wanting to ruin beautiful things. So thank you for all the work you do. And anything you want to plug before I bid you adieu?
No, we do appreciate the opportunity today. We just invite everybody to come out and visit orthodoxreflections.com. And we do, if you come out and you disagree with us, we publish commentary from people who disagree with us all the time. We're just asking that you make it a substantive disagreement, so we can actually have a conversation. If you come out and call us meanie pies, that it's not really substantive discussion, but we're here to foster dialogue and discussion over all things Orthodox, particularly as it intersects with culture. So just love to see everybody out. Come by Orthodox Reflections. Love to be at your conference. Please have another one so we can come next year. We look forward to hearing Metropolitan Jonah speak as part of the recording.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Nicholas, and for squeezing me into your busy schedule. God bless you, and hope to meet you in real life at some point. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Bye.